Ma'am, step away from the vehicle. You're trespassing. I asked you nicely.
Officer, I own this property. That car, that pavement, you're standing on my land.
Yeah? Then prove it. ID, right now.
You're about to arrest the landlord.
Officer Kyle Vance had been patrolling the upscale suburbs of Atlanta for 6 years when he made the decision that would end his career, humiliate his department, and cost the taxpayers $4.5 million. At 32 years old, Vance was known in the precinct as a cowboy, an officer who preferred aggressive enforcement over community dialogue and who believed his badge gave him absolute authority that could not be questioned. On a bright, sweltering Thursday afternoon in July, he received a dispatch call regarding a trespassing dispute at Holloway Plaza, a high-end strip mall featuring boutique gyms, organic markets, and coffee shops. The caller was Braden Miller, a 29-year-old fitness center manager who was convinced that the woman parked in the owner-reserved spot was not only trespassing but lowering the property value simply by being there. What neither man knew was that the woman Regina Holloway didn't just have a right to that parking spot. She held the deed to every square inch of asphalt beneath their feet. Before we get into the details of this catastrophic failure of judgment, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? If you believe in accountability and justice, please hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us keep these stories in the public eye. Holloway Plaza sits on the edge of Buckhead, a symbol of new money and polished aesthetics. It's the kind of place where luxury SUVs line the front row and the landscaping is manicured to perfection. It was 1:15 p.m. under a clear blue sky. The lunch rush was winding down, but the parking lot remained busy. Braden Miller stood inside the glass doors of Apex Velocity Fitness, staring out at the parking lot with his arms crossed. He had been the manager for 6 months, a role he took very seriously. Braden was the type of manager who memorized the license plates of his high-paying members and viewed anyone else as an intruder. For the last 20 minutes, he had been watching a silver Mercedes Maybach sedan parked in the spot clearly marked, reserved for property owner. The car was sleek, expensive, and imposing. But for Braden, the car wasn't the issue. The driver was. Leaning against the hood of the vehicle was Regina Holloway, a 54-year-old black woman dressed in a sharp navy pantsuit, holding a tablet and occasionally taking photos of the pavement. To Braden's biased eye, she didn't look like a property owner. In his mind, property owners were distant corporate entities or older white men who came in with entourages. He assumed she was a driver waiting for a client, or worse, someone casing the joint. He watched her tap on her tablet, circle a pothole near the curb, and make a note. Why was she loitering? Why was she taking pictures? His irritation grew into suspicion, and his suspicion hardened into a need for action. He walked out, told her to move, and when she politely declined, saying she had business there, Braden didn't listen. He went back inside and dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? Yeah, this isn't an emergency, but I need an officer at Holloway Plaza. I have an individual refusing to leave private property. She's parked in the owner's spot, blocking access, and she's acting belligerent. Is she threatening anyone? She's refusing to leave. She's trespassing. I think she might be under the influence or something. She's just wandering around the parking lot, taking pictures of the ground. It's making my members nervous. We'll send a unit. Braden hung up, feeling a surge of self-righteous satisfaction. He had protected his turf. Officer Kyle Vance picked up the call. He was 2 miles away, finishing a lunch break. When he saw the code for trespassing and the location, he didn't think of mediation. He thought of enforcement. Vance had a reputation for quick resolutions, which usually meant handcuffs and tow trucks. As he turned his siren on to cut through the traffic, he had already decided how this was going to go down. The suspect would be removed, the car would be impounded, and order would be restored. He had no idea he was driving toward a precipice. Regina Holloway was not someone who needed to shout to be heard. At 54, she had spent 3 decades navigating the cutthroat world of commercial real estate in Georgia. She had started with a single duplex in Decatur and built an empire that spanned 3 counties. She was known in boardrooms for her silence. She would listen, analyze, and then deliver a verdict that was final. She was meticulous. The reason she was standing in the parking lot of Holloway Plaza that afternoon was that her maintenance team had reported a drainage issue near the fitness center. Regina didn't like reports. She liked eyes-on verification. She had driven herself over to inspect the grading of the asphalt before authorizing a $50,000 repaving contract. She was doing her job. She had worked hard for the luxury of that Mercedes Maybach, and she had worked even harder for the title of landlord. But to the world passing by on the street, and specifically to men like Braden Miller and Officer Vance, her resume was invisible. All they saw was a demographic. This blindness was not new to Regina. She had been followed in department stores she could buy out. She had been handed keys by valet drivers who assumed she was staff. She had learned to navigate these indignities with a steel spine and a calm demeanor. However, today tested her patience. When the young manager had come out earlier to shoo her away like a stray cat, she had simply said, "I have a right to be here, young man." She didn't feel the need to explain her portfolio to a tenant. Officer Kyle Vance, on the other hand, had a portfolio of a different kind. In his 6 years with the department, Vance had accumulated 14 complaints. Most were for discourtesy, but a troubling number involved the questionable towing of vehicles. Internal Affairs had looked into him twice regarding his relationship with Redline Towing, a local company owned by a friend of his. Rumors swirled in the precinct that Vance received kickbacks for every luxury car he sent their way, calling in impounds for expired tags or parking violations that other officers would have issued a warning for. He targeted out-of-towners and people he deemed unlikely to fight a ticket in court. His supervisors considered him proactive and a revenue generator, ignoring the toxicity of his policing style. Vance believed in dominance. He believed that respect was something you demanded, not earned. He had been trained in a culture that viewed the public as potential threats rather than employers. When he heard the dispatcher describe a belligerent female refusing to leave, his mind painted a caricature. He didn't check the license plate of the Mercedes against the property records. He didn't consider that a $200,000 car might belong to someone of significance. He just saw a target. He pulled his cruiser into the plaza, bypassing the empty spaces to pull up directly behind Regina's car, blocking her in. The lights on his bar flashed blue and red, reflecting off the polished chrome of her vehicle. He stepped out of the car, adjusting his belt. He was a large man, physically imposing, and he used his size to intimidate. He put on his sunglasses despite the fact that he was walking into the shade of the building's awning. He saw Regina standing by the front bumper of her car, her back to him, looking at the curb. She didn't jump. She didn't look guilty. She turned slowly, her face composed, watching him approach. Vance didn't like her calmness. He wanted submission. He walked with a heavy stride, hand resting near his service weapon, a habit but a threatening one. This was the moment the trap was set, not by Regina, but by Vance's own arrogance. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle," Vance barked as he closed the distance. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't ask what was going on. He issued a command. Regina paused, holding her tablet against her chest. She looked at the officer, taking in his nameplate, his demeanor, and the aggressive positioning of his patrol car. "Officer," she said, her voice steady, "I am inspecting the pavement. Is there a problem?" "The problem is you're trespassing. I need to see your identification and the registration for this vehicle immediately." "I'm not trespassing," Regina corrected him, her tone dropping a degree in temperature. "I am conducting business." "The manager says otherwise," Vance snapped, pointing a thumb toward the gym entrance. "He says you've been asked to leave and you refused. That makes it criminal trespass. Now ID. Now." Regina took a breath. She had been in high-stakes negotiations with hostile zoning boards that were less stressful than this, but she knew the danger of a man with a badge and an ego. "Officer Vance," she read from his uniform. "If you will allow me to explain, I'm not here for a debate." Vance interrupted, stepping into her personal space. "I'm here to enforce the law. You are on private property. The owner's representative wants you gone. You are blocking a reserved spot. Do you have a license, or are you driving without one?" The insult was sharp and deliberate. Regina tightened her grip on her tablet. "I am parked in the spot reserved for the owner because that is the appropriate place for me to be. If you would simply—" "Last warning." Vance's voice rose loud enough to turn heads 3 storefronts down. "ID, or you're going in the back of the car." Braden Miller pushed open the glass doors of the gym and stepped out, a smug look plastered across his face. He felt emboldened by the officer's presence. He walked up behind Vance, maintaining a safe distance but close enough to pile on. "I told her, officer." Braden said, his voice dripping with feigned exhaustion. "I told her this spot is for the building owner only. She's been out here for 30 minutes acting crazy, taking pictures of cracks in the ground. It's bad for business." Vance nodded at Braden, acknowledging him as the authority figure, completely ignoring the woman in the $2,000 suit. "You hear that?" Vance said to Regina. "You're disturbing the peace and disrupting commerce. We can do this the easy way or the hard way." Regina looked at Braden. "Young man, you are making a very expensive mistake." Braden laughed, a short, nervous sound. "The only mistake is you thinking you can park your fancy rental here and intimidate me." Vance turned back to Regina. "Okay, that's it. You're done. I'm impounding the vehicle." He reached for his radio. "Dispatch, send me a tow. Flatbed. Priority." Regina's eyes widened slightly. "You are not towing my car. That is theft." "It's an impound incidental to arrest," Vance sneered. "Because you're going to jail for obstruction and trespassing." "I have identification in my bag," Regina said, gesturing toward the open window of the Mercedes where her leather tote sat on the passenger seat. "It proves who I am." "Don't reach," Vance yelled, his hand dropping instantly to the grip of his pistol. The motion was sudden and violent. "Back away from the car. Hands where I can see them." Passers-by froze. A woman loading groceries 2 cars away dropped her bags. 2 young men walking out of the coffee shop pulled out their phones. The atmosphere shifted from a dispute to a potential tragedy in a heartbeat. "I am simply getting my identification as you requested," Regina said, freezing her movement, her palms open and facing him. "I didn't tell you to reach into the car," Vance lied, adrenaline flooding his system. He was rewriting the encounter in real time to justify his aggression. "Turn around. Face the vehicle. Now." Regina looked at the cameras pointed at her. She saw the red recording lights. She knew that her survival depended on compliance, even if the orders were unlawful. She turned slowly, placing her hands on the hot metal of her car's roof. "I am complying, Officer Vance. I am the owner of this property. You are making a mistake that you cannot undo." "Yeah, and I'm the police commissioner," Vance mocked. "Keep your hands there." He grabbed her left wrist, twisting it behind her back with unnecessary force. Regina winced as the shoulder of her suit jacket pulled tight. He slapped the metal cuff onto her wrist, the sound echoing off the storefronts. He grabbed her other hand, jerking it back. "You are hurting me," Regina said, her voice tight with pain but devoid of fear. "Stop resisting." Vance recited the line like a script. "You're under arrest." Braden watched his arms crossed, a look of triumphant vindication on his face. He thought he had won. He thought he had cleaned up the neighborhood. He had no idea that the video being recorded by the coffee shop patrons was already being uploaded to social media. He had no idea that the vagrant being cuffed was the woman who signed his paychecks indirectly. Vance tightened the cuffs until they bit into her skin. He patted her down, a humiliation that made Regina's jaw set like concrete. He spun her around to face him. "You have the right to remain silent, Vance began dragging her toward his patrol car. "I am Regina Holloway," she said loudly, addressing the witnesses, addressing the camera phones. "I own Holloway Plaza. I own the building this officer is standing on. I own the lease for Apex Velocity Fitness. This officer is arresting me on my own land." "Save it for the booking officer," Vance said, shoving her into the back seat of his cruiser. The heat inside the car was stifling. He slammed the door, sealing her in. He turned to Braden. "Tow truck will be here in 10 minutes. We'll get that eyesore out of your way." "Thanks, officer," Braden said, shaking his head. "Some people just think they can do whatever they want." "Not in my town," Vance said, adjusting his belt, feeling like a hero. 10 minutes passed. Regina sat in the back of the cruiser, sweat trickling down her back, her mind racing not with panic but with legal strategy. She watched through the window as a tow truck, redline towing, rumbled into the lot. The driver, a man Vance clearly knew, hopped out and started rigging the Mercedes. They were going to steal her car. But the crowd hadn't dispersed. In fact, it had grown. The two young men filming had been joined by a dozen others. They were shouting at Vance. "She said she owns the place. Why didn't you check her ID? This is crazy, man. That's a Maybach." Vance ignored them, leaning against his cruiser, waiting for the tow to finish so he could transport his prisoner. But the noise had attracted attention on the radio. A watch commander, Sergeant Miller, no relation to Braden, was patrolling nearby. He was 52 years old, a veteran who had survived 3 administrations by being cautious and following the book. When he heard the radio chatter and saw the social media alerts starting to ping on the department's monitoring software regarding an incident at Holloway Plaza, his gut told him to intervene. Sergeant Miller pulled his SUV into the lot just as the tow truck was lifting the front wheels of the Mercedes off the ground. He saw the crowd. He saw the angry faces. He saw Vance looking too relaxed for a riot in the making. He stepped out, putting his hat on. He walked over to Vance. "What do we have here, Vance?" "Trespassing Sarge," Vance said, confident. "Manager called it in. Female suspect refused to leave, started reaching for things in her car. Resisted arrest. She's in the back." "She claim anything?" the sergeant asked, looking at the luxury car. "Yeah, she's spinning some yarn about owning the shopping center." Vance laughed. "Delusional." The sergeant looked at the car. He looked at the building. "Holloway Plaza." He read the sign above the archway. He looked at the registration sticker on the Mercedes. He walked over to the back window of Vance's cruiser. He opened the door. Regina looked at him. "Sergeant," she said, "my name is Regina Holloway. My identification is in my purse on the front seat of my car, which your officer is currently allowing to be stolen. I need you to go to your computer, check the Fulton County Tax Assessor's website for this address, and tell me who is listed as the owner." There was something in her voice, a command, not a plea, that struck the sergeant. It was the voice of authority. "Hold on," the sergeant said. He closed the door. He looked at Vance. "Did you verify ownership?" "The manager is right there." Vance pointed to Braden. "He verified it." "Did you check the county records?" "No, I didn't need to. She's trespassing." The sergeant walked to his own vehicle. He opened his laptop. He typed in the address, 1400 Holloway Drive. The screen loaded. "Owner of Record Holloway Commercial Holdings, LLC. Registered agent Regina Holloway." The sergeant felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He clicked on the vehicle registration database. He ran the plate of the Mercedes. Registered owner Regina Holloway. He looked at the mugshot on the license. It was the woman in the back of the car. He looked up at the Holloway Plaza sign again. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Vance hadn't just arrested an innocent woman. He had arrested the landlord on her own property based on the word of a tenant and was currently impounding her car. This was a lawsuit. This was a career ender. This was a nightmare. Sergeant Miller slammed his laptop shut and moved with a speed that belied his age. He stormed over to the tow truck driver. "Put it down," he roared. The driver looked confused. Kyle said, I don't care what Kyle said. Drop that car right now, unhook it. If you scratch it, you're buying it. Vance stepped forward, confused. Sarge, what are you doing? That's evidence. Shut your mouth, Vance. The sergeant hissed, his face inches from the younger officers. You give me the keys to the cuffs, now. But give me the keys. Vance handed them over, bewildered. The sergeant walked to the back of the patrol unit and threw the door open. He reached in and helped Regina out, careful not to touch her head or handle her roughly. He unlocked the cuffs with trembling hands. Ms. Holloway, the sergeant said, his voice low and apologetic. I am Sergeant Miller. I am removing these restraints. You are not under arrest. Regina rubbed her wrists. She didn't say thank you. She stepped out, smoothing her suit jacket. She looked at Vance, whose face was slowly turning pale as the reality of the situation began to dawn on him. She looked at the tow truck driver scrambling to unhook her car. Finally, she looked at Braden, who was standing by the gym door, his smirk replaced by a look of sheer terror. Officer Vance, Regina said, her voice carrying across the silent parking lot. You arrested me for trespassing on property that I built. You ignored my identification. You threatened me with a weapon because I tried to show you the deed. The manager said, Vance stammered, pointing a shaking finger at Braden. Regina turned her gaze to Braden. She walked toward him. He actually took a step back. Mr. Miller, she said, you called the police on your landlord. I didn't know. You didn't look like... Braden fumbled. I didn't look like what? Regina asked. I didn't look like an owner, and because of your prejudice and this officer's incompetence, I was handcuffed in front of my customers. She paused, letting the silence stretch. Your lease has a clause regarding good conduct and nuisance activities, Regina said, reciting the contract from memory. Harassing the property owner and utilizing emergency services to file false reports constitutes a material breach of your lease agreement. I will be contacting your corporate headquarters within the hour. I expect you to be vacated within 30 days. Braden looked like he was going to be sick. Regina turned back to the sergeant. I want that officer's badge number. I want his supervisor. And I want to file a formal complaint for false arrest assault and civil rights violations immediately. Yes, ma'am, the sergeant said. He turned to Vance. Vance, you're done. Get in the passenger seat of my car. You are relieved of duty effective immediately. Sarge, Get in the car. Vance, stripped of his authority in front of the crowd he had tried to intimidate, walked to the sergeant's SUV. The witnesses cheered. The camera phones captured his walk of shame. He had arrived as the predator. He was leaving as a liability. The aftermath was swift and brutal, but justice in America is rarely a straight line. It took time. The video of the arrest went viral before the sun set that day. Landlord arrested for trespassing on own property trended nationally. The visual of a black woman in a business suit being handcuffed against a Maybach while a young officer smirked was undeniable proof of bias. Regina Holloway sued the city, the police department, and Officer Kyle Vance personally. During the discovery phase of the lawsuit, her lawyers uncovered the depth of Vance's corruption. They found the text messages between Vance and Redline Towing. They found a pattern of illegal impounds targeting minority drivers in affluent neighborhoods people Vance assumed didn't belong. The investigation revealed that Vance had towed over 40 cars in similar circumstances, splitting the impound fees with the tow company. This wasn't just racism, it was racketeering. Officer Kyle Vance was fired 3 weeks after the incident. But it didn't end there. The district attorney, under immense public pressure and facing a mountain of evidence, indicted Vance on charges of violation of oath of office, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to commit theft. He was convicted a year later and sentenced to 3 years in prison. Braden Miller was fired by the fitness chain the next morning. The company issued a groveling public apology, but Regina stood firm on the lease violation. The gym was evicted and the space sat empty for 6 months, a tax write-off Regina was happy to take to make a point. The city settled Regina's civil rights lawsuit for $4.5 million. Regina took the money and established the Holloway Legal Defense Fund, a non-profit dedicated to providing top-tier legal representation for victims of racial profiling and wrongful arrest in Georgia. Regina Holloway still owns the plaza. She still drives her Maybach, but she never inspects the pavement without her lawyer on speed dial. This story isn't just about a bad cop or a biased manager. It's about the assumption of criminality that attaches to black success. Regina Holloway had the deed, the car, and the suit, but to Officer Vance, she was still just a trespasser. Ownership didn't protect her. Wealth didn't protect her. Only the serendipitous arrival of a supervisor with a conscience and the presence of witnesses prevented a tragedy. It makes you wonder if this can happen to a woman who owns the city block. What happens to the people who don't? What happens to the people who can't call the county commissioner? We need to ask ourselves why discomfort is treated as a crime and why a badge is treated as a license to bypass the Constitution. Do you think police officers should be required to verify property ownership through public records before making trespassing arrests on commercial lots? Should managers like Braden face criminal charges for making biased 911 calls? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe that the truth matters, share this story. We'll see you in the next one. The end.